Officials say that it is the largest attack on the region since the war began.
On the morning of October 3, 2025, at around 10 a.m., black smoke began to rise over the city of Orsk in Russia's Orenburg region. The smoke was coming from one of Russia's most important oil refineries, the Orsknefteorgsintez plant. This was no small facility. This refinery could handle 6.6 million tons of crude oil every year. It produced over 30 different products: gasoline, jet fuel, diesel, lubricants, and even the bitumen used to build roads. In short, this plant helped fuel Russia's war. The refinery was located 1,400 kilometers away from Ukraine. That's almost like a drone flying from New York to Chicago just to hit one single target. No one thought Ukraine could strike that deep. And yet, on that morning, that is exactly what happened. But why did Ukraine do it? And how did their drones make it past Russian defenses? Let's dig deeper. Ukraine had one clear goal: cripple Russia's energy network. Think about it. Russia's war machine runs on fuel. Tanks need diesel, jets need kerosene, trucks need gasoline. No fuel, no fight. So Ukraine's planners said, instead of only fighting on the front lines, let's go for the fuel behind the fight. The Orsk refinery was the perfect target. Not only did it produce huge amounts of fuel, it was also the only refinery in Orenburg Oblast. If Ukraine could damage it, a whole region of Russia would struggle to get fuel. And that wasn't all. That same night, another strike hit the Azot chemical plant in the Perm region. This factory produced ammonium nitrate, used as fertilizer but also as a key ingredient in explosives. Knocking that offline was another blow to both Russia's economy and its military. So the mission was simple but bold. Hit Russia where it hurts, deep, far from the battlefield. But there was a huge problem. Russia had defenses, and on paper those defenses looked impossible to beat. Russian refineries and energy plants are protected like fortresses. Around Orsk, Ukraine faced layered defenses, powerful electronic warfare systems designed to jam and blind drones, Panzer air defense units built specifically to shoot down low-flying UAVs, and radar networks capable of detecting aerial contacts. Soldiers were posted around industrial sites after months of repeated drone threats, further strengthening the defensive ring. On top of that, Orsk's great distance from the front line led many Russian commanders to assume it was effectively untouchable. One propagandist even quipped that any strike must have been launched from Kazakhstan. The challenge then was stark. Fly drones across roughly 1,400 kilometers of Russian territory, thread them past these overlapping defenses, and still deliver enough destructive power to accomplish a meaningful effect. How do you pull off a mission like that? Before the main drones could arrive, Ukraine needed to test and weaken Russian defenses. That's where decoy drones and jamming tactics came in. Ukrainian sources said that some drones were launched first just to confuse Russian radar. Others flew lower, hugging the terrain, making it harder for Panzer systems to detect them. Russian air defense crews often mistake Ukrainian drones for their own. Why? Because Russia also uses Iranian-made Shahed drones, and on radar, they can look very similar. This split-second hesitation gives Ukrainian drones the chance to get through. By the time Russia realized what was happening, the real strike drones, called Lyuty or Fierce, were already inbound. The star of the operation was the Lyuty long-range strike drone. Originally designed for a 1,000-kilometer range, this mission demonstrated it could fly some 1,400 kilometers, carrying a 75-kilogram warhead, enough to destroy refinery equipment and traveling faster than Iran's Shahed drones. Its navigation suite was hardened against jamming and capable of changing altitude mid-flight, allowing the drone to slip past layered defenses and adjust its flight profile as needed. In short, Lyuty became Ukraine's homegrown answer to the Shahed, an unmanned weapon that can fly silently for hours across fields, rivers, forests, and cities with a single purpose: strike and disable critical energy targets. On October 3rd, several Lyuty drones did exactly that. striking refineries and causing significant disruption. So how did these drones avoid getting shot down? First, they flew low and slow, making radar detection harder. Second, they were launched in waves, so Russian gunners didn't know which one to fire at. And then came the most surprising fact: Russia's own geography helped Ukraine. Why? Because Orsk is so far away that Russia's densest air defense systems like the S-400s weren't even positioned there. Moscow never thought Ukraine could hit that deep, so coverage was thin. When the drones finally reached the refinery, there wasn't enough time for Russia to stop them. One hit caused a fire inside the facility. Evacuations were reported. Videos showed smoke rising high above Orsk. For the first time, Russia realized no place is safe. Russia didn't stay quiet. On the very same day, it unleashed one of its largest retaliatory strikes of the war, launching 381 drones and 35 missiles in a massive wave aimed primarily at Ukraine's energy infrastructure in the Kharkiv and Poltava regions. The assault marked one of the biggest attacks on Ukraine's gas production sites, with Naftogaz, the country's main gas company, calling it the most serious strike since the beginning of the invasion. Entire towns in Donetsk were plunged into darkness, and civilians were left without heating just as winter was closing in. The tit for tat was unmistakable. Ukraine had targeted Russia's fuel, and Russia struck back at Ukraine's gas, showing that energy had become the true battlefield of this phase of the war. Let's zoom out. The Orsk strike was just one part of a larger Ukrainian campaign. Since August 2025, Ukraine has hit at least 16 of Russia's 38 oil refineries. Nearly 40% of Russia's refining capacity has gone offline. In September alone, Russia lost 1 million tons of gasoline production. That's 20% of its domestic supply. The result? Gasoline shortages in more than 20 Russian regions. Some areas ration fuel to 10 to 20 liters per person. Crimea and the Far East were hardest hit. And Russia was forced to ban gasoline exports until 2026 just to keep its people supplied. That's how powerful these strikes were. An important new factor in these strikes is the role of U.S. intelligence. Reports suggest Washington has been providing Ukraine with critical data on long-range energy targets deep inside Russia, meaning Kiev is no longer operating blind. This support includes satellite imagery, target coordinates, and even real-time tracking. On top of that, the U.S. is reportedly weighing whether to supply Ukraine with Tomahawk cruise missiles. With a range of 1,600 to 2,500 kilometers and a 450-kilogram warhead, these missiles would be vastly more destructive than drones, putting virtually all of Russia's energy infrastructure, pipelines, refineries, and power plants within Ukraine's reach. The open question now is whether Washington will actually approve such a transfer, because if it does, the stakes of this energy war would rise dramatically. The October 3rd strike left the Orsk refinery damaged, triggered evacuations, and forced Russia to acknowledge that drones had penetrated deep into its territory, even as state media tried to downplay the scale of the incident. Ukraine's security service quickly confirmed responsibility, framing the operation as a deliberate message. The psychological and economic effects were far greater than the physical damage. For the first time, Russians living 1,400 kilometers from Ukraine saw smoke from an attack in their own city, prompting questions about whether anywhere inside Russia could truly be safe. Economically, the hits worsened fuel shortages, pushing Moscow to seek gasoline imports from China, South Korea, and Singapore, while sanctions made repairs slow and costly. The strike proved that Ukraine had found a way to hit Russia where it hurt most, its energy lifeline. And this brings us to the final point, the lesson. Ukraine can't match Russia tank for tank, jet for jet. But with smart tactics like long-range drones, it can still cause massive damage. This is called asymmetric warfare. A weaker side uses creative tools to strike a stronger enemy's weak spots. On October 3, 2025 at 10 a.m., Ukraine showed the world just how effective this can be. One refinery, one strike, one morning of smoke in Orsk. But the shock waves traveled far, into Russia's economy, its military logistics, and even its politics. In the end, Ukraine didn't just hit an oil plant. They struck at the heart of Russia's war machine. For the cost of a few drones, they forced a superpower to face fuel shortages, economic pain, and the truth that distance is no defense. If you think that's a game changer, hit that like button. Share this with anyone who still thinks size wins wars. And don't forget to subscribe, so you'll be the first to see what happens the next time Ukraine takes the fight straight into Russia's backyard.